From Mountain Home to Raft River, we've got all the District 4 analysis you'll need to know. This is the Magic Valley Prepcast with Scott Burton.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, where we break down everything District 4 week in, week out. Brandon Baney, pleased to be joined as always by Scott Burton, who's going by his alias today, Jimmy Dugan. What's going on, Jimmy?
What's happening? Just representing the Rockford Peaches. Those that are familiar with A League of Their Own. This is Tom Hanks' character, Jimmy Dugan, and sporting the jersey today. So glad to be here.
One of the most iconic lines in all of cinema, not just sports movies, but any cinema. Oh. There's no crying in baseball.
Oh, I don't think they realized the gold mine they had when that scene was shot. It will live forever and ever and ever. And it's just one of those things that there's no crying in math class. You know, there's no crying on the podcast. You know, whatever. I mean, it just transcends. It's awesome.
That's right. We'll try and keep it together today. We didn't have a show last week. So with spring sports going on and 5 million things, it's a really bad time to get sick and be under the weather. So we had sickness run through our household last week. And so we had to take a week off from the podcast, not because of anything Scott did. This was all on me. So
yeah, usually it is me, but not this time.
That's right. So it's been a while since we've done this. If you are new to the show, thanks for being with us. Each week we kind of pick a couple of big stories from the Magic Valley. It could be 4A all the way down to 1A, and we're going to hit pretty much all the classifications in some form or fashion today. Brandon Baney with Scott Burton, and Scott likes to, especially as we've gotten into the spring and baseball season, you have a lot of jerseys of fictional baseball players and managers from movies, I've noticed. You have quite a collection.
I've got the collection. I've got, the Roy Hobbs jersey from The Natural. I've even got, check this out. Remember the old Rob Lowe hockey movie called Youngblood back in the 80s? I've got a Youngblood jersey. I've got the Keanu Reeves character,
Shane
Falco's jersey. Yep, you bet it. And I'll start sporting them a little bit. I just thought, because we're talking a little bit of softball today, that this is the closest thing I could get was a little bit of Jimmy Dugan.
Yeah, it looks great. And so if you're watching the video version of this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page, you can see this great looking jersey and that terrible hat that Scott is wearing, LA Dodgers hat. And if you're listening audio only at IdahoSports.com, right across the top of the homepage, there's a tab that says Prepcasts, and then it's got a little drop-down menu, and it's got all of our Prepcasts that we do around the state. You can listen there, or you can also listen wherever you download your podcasts. So just type in Magic Valley Prepcast. It'll be right there. Hit that subscribe button, and then each week when we do a new episode, you don't have to go look for it. It'll just automatically be delivered to your favorite podcast vehicle. So however you're consuming this show, thanks for doing it. And let's dive right in. You talked about a nice collection that you have at home of memorabilia, Scott. Well, Filer High School added to their collection of trophies last year when they won the 3A softball championship. They came in as the defending 3A champs, and it hasn't been the smoothest ride yet for the defending champs in Filer.
No, it hasn't. And again, I marvel at your segues. Best in biz. It has not been an easy road for Filer coming back. I mean, they've got 7 returning players, I believe is what they have on their roster. So you think that they might be kind of picking up where they left off. But when you follow softball, you know that pitching is a huge part of it, even more so in softball than anything else. And they lost 2 college-level pitchers last year. So really, who they're bringing back behind them isn't going to replace what they lost in, Samantha Taylor, who led all of 3A last year in strikeouts. She's at Treasure Valley. And then they also lost a C of I player, and that was McCarty Stoddard. So when you factor that those 2 are gone, that's a lot of slack for people to pick up, because really, and it's funny because one of the things that stood out at the way that Filer started the season was, okay, fine, you lose those two pitchers. That means with those two on the hill, or in the circle rather, there's not a lot of balls being hit defensively, right? Because they are really taking care of business at the plate. A lot of strikeouts. So defense really isn't getting a ton of work. Well, check this out. This shows kind of what Filer had to go through with some growing pains. There was a stretch earlier in this season, early in the season, where Filer committed 43 errors over 3 games.
Wow.
Think about that. And so it's funny because, their coach, Buck Taylor's a good friend of mine. And so, talking to him about it, it's almost like watching an absolute train wreck. And it got the attention of everybody. I mean, past players, community, coaches. Everybody is just going, what in the world is going on here? So they kind of had this come to the light meeting and really focused in on that portion of the game. Because when you think about it, you lose those two pitchers. All right, your defense is going to have to make some plays now. And for the longest time, they were not used to doing that outside of practice. And so here they are. And so they've gotten a lot better. The energy's improved, and their accountability is getting a lot better. So even though they're the defending champs, the growing that this Filer team is doing right now is really like a brand new team. And it's kind of fun to watch. And from a coach's standpoint, from Taylor's standpoint, it's kind of fun to see them play as well as they are and grow as much as they have.
Yeah. So you mentioned the two, the good news is, hey, we bring back almost the entire crew, 7 starters. The bad news, the 2 that left, as you mentioned, Samantha Taylor, McCarty Stoddard, they were 2 4-year varsity pitchers. And not only that, but like, for example, when Taylor was pitching, Stoddard would play shortstop. And they were also the 2 offensive leaders. I mean, of all the hitting categories, those 2 departed seniors led Filer in every offensive statistic last year. So you're talking about some big replacements. And Filer, as we said, it's been an up and down year. They're 12-10 overall, but they're 4-3 in the conference, which puts them right within striking distance, because we did a segment, spotlight on the Gooding softball team a couple weeks ago and how great of a season they're having. It really is a dogfight right now with Gooding, Filer, Buell, and Kimberly. All of them have all beaten each other this year, and the conference records are a little uneven. They were supposed to play 9 conference games. They're supposed to play everybody 3 times. Well, Mother Nature has messed with the schedule a little bit, but I mean, if these are the standings as of today. Gooding 5-3, Filer 4-3, Buell 3-3-1, Kimberly 2-5-1, and everybody is kind of just beating up on each other. It's been really fun to watch.
It's just fun to watch people beat up on each other. Just go to a Padre-Dodger game. But so that is really indicative of how evenly matched that these teams are. Because when you get a team like maybe Filer had last year with the dominating pitching, you can pretty much pencil them in because of their domination in the circle. Well, it's not there. And so now everybody's having to make plays. They're coming to have timely hits, play good defense, things that aren't factored in when you have that dominating pitcher. And for a team like Filer, I mean, they've got some good young kids that are doing really, really well. One that stands out is freshman Mariah Thomas, who is finishing with one of the highest batting averages in school history at the moment. And her, just really doing a great job as a young kid having to step up in these kind of shoes.
Yeah, a 515 batting average, which is, I mean, anything over 500 in high school is just insane. It's hard to wrap your mind around. I mean, that's more than 50% of the time you're getting a hit, and that's not even factoring in her on-base percentage, which is even higher than that. Yeah,
and those 2 things right there are pushing the school record right now. We'll see how it ends up as a little freshman. That's encouraging, for Filer baseball. And, so they're trying to fill those voids. And another, when you talk about pitching a little bit, Filer's got a starting pitcher that moved back from Canyon Ridge, Sid Snyder, I believe, and she hasn't thrown for a bit. So they're trying to get her going alongside another freshman, Pierce, who is throwing really well and maturing very well. So there are a lot of good young players on this Filer team. And this is when you talk about it's not a rebuilding, it's a reloading year. They are going to be poised to be good for the next several years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I believe last year Gooding won the conference title in the regular season, and Filer won when it counted. They won districts and then ultimately won state. We could be headed towards a similar scenario this year. Filer has a huge doubleheader coming up on Thursday against Buell, and Buell is another team that's kind of emerged from dark horse into contender status. It's funny to me because all of these coaches in the preseason said Kimberly was going to be kind of the big bad team in the conference, and yet Kimberly is the team it's in last. They're 2-5-1 in the league. They're 7-10 and 1 overall.
Yeah, and I think that surprises everybody because I think a lot of people thought Kimberly was going to maybe run the conference for the next 4 to 5 years. And but run the conference and win the conference are two different things. They can lose these games here, but they show up to the district tournament and win those, then they're still the big dog on campus, So Kimberly is not really doing, I think, what a lot of people thought they would do, but what that's doing is it's giving a lot of confidence to these other teams that this conference isn't dominated by Kimberly anymore. And any of those 4 teams could actually do some damage in the district tournament. It's kind of fun. And, and you want to talk about a growing pain for young teams. So at the start of this season, Filer was really kind of getting it handed to them, right? They were getting embarrassed. They were getting embarrassed. And, because they were the defending champs, they would show up and they would get everybody's best effort because they were the defending champs, right? Well, we talked about their losses this year, the 2 pitchers they lost and how they're starting to pick up the slack, blah, blah, blah. So what the coaching staff at Filer did to these girls was at the beginning of the year when they were just getting annihilated and embarrassed, they made the girls watch the other team celebrate at their expense and made them stand there and watch it and say, okay, is this what you want? And hopefully that it resonated with them, to like, hey, we don't want to see this anymore. And we want to be the ones celebrating. And so I think that was really a strategic thing that the coaches did that made this young Filer team grow rather quickly. So, I thought that was really interesting. And now, we talked about the errors early in the season. They're still making some, manageable 2 to 3 a game. But they're hitting on all cylinders right now. Filer is hot.
You're right. They've won 5 of their last 6. The only loss was a 7-5 loss to Gooding in the second game of a twin bill. So they are playing their best softball at the right time. And as the defending champs, of course, they're going to get the best shot from every other team. And if you knock off Filer, the defending champs, you've earned the right to celebrate a little bit. So it's interesting that tactic that they use to motivate these Filer players. This is a team offensively that, just isn't going to beat you with the long ball. There's some squads that will just crush homer after homer after homer. This is not that team. The leader on this Filer team in home runs is Jasmine Earl with 2. And that's half of the team's total. They've got 4 home runs total. But I think that bodes well at state when you're seeing pitchers that you haven't seen all year. And, if you're playing a team from up north or over in the Boise area, it might be the first time you're seeing this pitcher, period. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to go station to station and manufacture runs that way, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And that's what Filer's doing. It's not like they have a ton of power. Cameron Barnes is kind of their linchpin, and as she goes, a lot of the Filer offense goes. But they are hitting line drives. They are doing it with speed. They're bunting. They're doing a lot of these things without power, and it's working right now. And it's going to be fun to see which team is the hottest team going into the tournament, because that is the team that's going to win it, and you talk about the little extras that a team will bring into a season for motivation. if you've been in the Magic Valley, you heard about the tragedy that kind of befell, Filer softball when they lost, Mia a couple of years ago to bone cancer. Little sister Allie is hanging around in the dugout and kind of providing that connection, to her sister. And so it's something that is really bringing this Filer team together. Because it's funny how those little things do so much for a team and their chemistry and the sisterhood and the brotherhood of teams, and just bring them together at the right time. And that seems to be working. And it was such an inspirational story, a sad story with Mia. And it was just a couple of years ago. And you can still find the articles online that tell you a little bit about it. But, one of the moments that Filer softball remembers from her was when they basically found out that chemo wasn't going to work anymore. Mia was like, you know what, then screw this. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to be a kid. And she went to school the next day. And during this process, got up to bat in one of the games and hit the ball and, tried to run on one leg. And it was just one of those moments that just made you realize that there are some bigger things out there than sports. But when you can connect those two, that's power. And Filer has that. And Coach Taylor called it a little angel in the dugout with Allie. So there's a lot behind the Filer story. And that's a big part of it right now.
Yeah, that was a really sad time for the Filer community. That was back in 2018. Mia Treese, she passed away just over a month before what would have been her 13th birthday. So she was 12 years old, and that was a tragic event. But now, as you said, they get that inspiration, and they get that angel in the dugout in the form of Mia's younger sister. And of course, I always believe this, but I think Mia's also helping them out from above a little bit too. So that's a great story for Filer softball. And as we said, we'll keep an eye on the defending champs, the Filer Wildcats, as they continue to navigate, this new course of going through a season with taking everybody's best shot. It's different to be a team that comes from the middle of the pack to win. It's different to be the top dog and do it again. So
absolutely. It's harder to stay on top than it is to get there.
Definitely. All right. Well, let's move to track and field. I was at the direct communications invite at Davis Field on the campus of Idaho State University in Pocatello last Friday. First of all, how cool is that this was a huge meet. 32 teams came from, East Idaho, the Magic Valley, even Nampa Christian made the drive over. It was a 32 team meet. It was long. It went like 14 hours. It was a very long day, but it was really cool. There was some great competition. And after holding the meet at Highland the year before, they were actually able to use a college facility. And how cool is that to use not only a college facility, but that's where the Big Sky Conference track and field championships are going to be in 2 weeks as well. So this is a big time venue. Pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely. And you talk about the small schools that went to this thing. If you've ever seen the movie Hoosiers, I've got a Hoosiers jersey too. Maybe I'll wear that during basketball season. It's like when they walk into the big giant gymnasium that is like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Well, that's how we all feel. Even at the 4A level, we walk into that place. That is such an impressive complex and such a cool experience for the smaller schools to get up there and do it. And you were there.
Yeah, the weather was awful. It was a downpour. Yeah, it was a downpour all day. It snowed during portions of the meet. So the weather really was not fun, but the competition was outstanding. And really the 1A schools that came from the Magic Valley impressed me the most. Carey and Hansen and Oakley and Raft River. Those four really stood out to me in terms of, they don't have the biggest teams because they're 1A schools, right? But the individuals they have at the top are all really impressive. And, in bigger schools, 4A, 5A track, you really have to have the numbers to compete for a team title. But at the smaller levels, I've found, at least in other states, that if you've got, 2 or 3 like really good athletes that are going to pretty much finish top 3 in all of their events, that's all it takes sometimes in
Yeah.
1A track, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really about scoring points, and I think we, touched on this a little bit in an earlier podcast about how track works. And if you can position your people, your athletes in the right positions, it doesn't mean they're always in the best events for them, but they're in a position to where they score the most points. And right at that smaller level, man, a couple athletes to just pile on the points is sometimes all it takes.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start on the boys' side where, how about this? Your champion in the 100-meter dash, Scott, and this had Highland was there, a 5A school. The Pocatello schools were there, the 4As. So it was 5A all the way down to 1A. Your 100-meter dash champion on the boys' side came from Hansen. A Hansen Husky, Jacob Pittman, wins the 100 with a time of 11:39, which, considering the weather he was running in, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no question about it. And that's one of the cool things about it too, is you don't get that opportunity very often to compete against that kind of competition. Hansen taking on Highland, for that matter. You don't get that opportunity. And so what a cool experience for the smaller schools to go, you know what? You ain't so bad. I think I can beat you, whatever the case is. And then they show up and they do it. Very cool.
Yeah, that was the highlight on the boys' side. Another highlight on the boys' side, this was a meet where they had it's not an officially sanctioned event, the old 4x1 throwers relay. All the throwers got to go out on the track and run the 4x1. And the Raft River boys won the 4x1 throwers relay. So, we got to give those guys a shout out too. Trevor Bankhead, Trey Whitaker, Talon Taylor, Lad Hansen, and you'll recognize those names from the offensive line in football as well. Trey Whitaker wasn't a lineman, but the other guys were. So that's always a fun event as well, the old throwers relay. And then on the girls' side, a couple of athletes stood out to me in the hurdles races. Addie Mitten from Oakley. She's becoming one of my favorite all-around athletes. So she's a great short hurdler. She finished third in the 100-meter hurdles at this big meet, which again is pretty impressive considering the competition she was going up against. And I got to do 1A D1 state basketball this year as well. And I got to see Oakley's boys and girls there. And Addie Mitten was one of the toughest lockdown defenders I saw on the basketball court this year. She's just tenacious, and she has that attitude and that mentality of nobody's going to stop me. And it's translating to the track as well. So it's been nice to watch her in a couple of different sports have success. So
yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things to where that mental game transcends into different sports. If you're a tough kid, then you're genuinely just tough in everything, and from those smaller schools, you get people like Mitten who's just playing everything and doing everything. And they're bringing that same mentality, and we've talked about how those smaller schools are kind of the lost gem in today's society anymore, because they are the last of really kind of the farm kids, the blue collar, small town country kids that really know how to handle hard work and adversity. You get into a lot of these bigger schools and, they don't handle it as well. But that's why I love the small town Idaho and places like Oakley, because they bring that type of mentality.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to watch her in the hurdles races, and we'll get back to the hurdles in a second, but also some great distance performances. Jessica Duran from Wendell finished fourth in the mile, and Allie Black, the great runner from Raft River, finished seventh in the 2 mile, which again is impressive considering you're going up against 3A, 4A, 5A schools. And then Allie Black was also part of Raft River's winning long distance relay team, that 800 medley. Raft River won that as well, and Allie Black was a big contributor to that. So she's going to be a distance dynamo at the 1A state track meet coming up later this spring. She'll be one to keep an eye on. Jessica Duran from Wendell as well. So the final performance I wanted to touch on was Shayli Smith from Carey, and she is a tremendous hurdler. Now, typically in the hurdles, you're usually good at one or the other, right? Because it's a different skill set almost. The short hurdles, the 100 or the 110s on the boys' side, it's more about quick burst and quick twitch. Whereas the 300 hurdles, they're further apart. You're relying more on your leg strides and timing things up. And so generally, you're really good at one or the other. Well, Shayli Smith is awesome at both events, and she had kind of a tough day. So what happened was they ran the 100 hurdles kind of earlier in the morning, and she was in the very first heat. This is one of those meets where they submit their best times, and then they get seeded according to their time. So the first heat is the 8 best hurdlers, and Shayli Smith was in that first heat. She was in either lane 4 or 5, which means she's got one of the best times coming in. And in that first heat, they run it. And it was close between her and a girl from Marsh Valley, but it looked like, to the naked eye, to me at least, it looked like Shayli Smith had won that heat. And generally, if you win the heat, you're going to win the event because you're going up against the best hurdlers. Well, all of a sudden, there's a delay and people are milling around the track. Because of the inclement weather, it caused a glitch in the automated timing system that they use to time these events out. And so they were like, boy, we might have to switch to hand-timed, for all these events, and they were trying to figure out a contingency plan. Well, they were able to get the automated system back up and running, and they said, okay, we're going to rerun that first heat. So her win gets wiped out. Well, they're lining up to get ready, and it's just a downpour, and everybody's wet, and all of a sudden you hear the gun go off twice for the false start. It's Shayli Smith, and she gets disqualified. Now, see, where I'm from in Montana, if you false start, you get a second chance. And then if you do it again, then you're gone. In Idaho, it's pretty harsh. One and you're done, huh?
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's always been that way, which, when you think about it too, it does shave tenths of a second, because if you got one to give, right, you're going to try to time the gun and maybe get that 10th or 2/10 start, right? Well, in Idaho, you can't do that. So you are literally waiting for the gun. But in this particular case, I mean, I don't know. Oh my gosh, I don't know how they let something like that go. That just doesn't seem fair to me at all. They run it, she wins it, or she's there, but that's not good enough because of a timing error system problem. Makes absolute no sense to me whatsoever.
So, I mean, that was heartbreaking to go from winning the event to no time, getting disqualified on the false start. And that could have kept her down for the rest of the day, but she still had a second hurdles race to run, the 300 hurdles. And fortunately, this was a long meet, so a lot of time passed, and she had time to, I guess, either ruminate on it or put it past her. But she comes back for the 300 hurdles, and she takes second place. She runs a clean race, and she only finished behind a girl from North Fremont. So her ability to battle back and not pack it in, not shut down after the mental anguish she had just suffered, and to finish second again in a race that featured Pocatello, Blackfoot, Century, Highland. I mean, these big schools, for her to come back and take second overall, that to me said a lot about her competitiveness and what type of athlete she is.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, it goes right back to what we were talking about. I mean, I think a lot of kids under that circumstance would have just folded up and gone home, or mentally anyway, just not recovered from it. But it says a lot, like you said, to block that out and realize that is done. It is over. Forget it. And now we got to move on to something else. And she was able to do it. And it's that toughness mentality. And, and if kids are out there listening, man, I tell you what, there is no substitute for being mentally tough. It makes up for so much physical inadequacies and lack of talent if you are tough. And that's a great example of it.
Yeah, so we'll be keeping an eye on Shayli Smith and the Carey Panthers as they continue their track and field season as well. But it was kind of cool to see, Hansen and Carey and Raft River and Wendell and all these great schools represent themselves really well at this really big, prestigious meet. So that was a lot of fun. And I'll give credit to Oakley. This meet didn't get over until they ran the 4x4, the last event. It was like 9:00 at night. And there was literally 4 teams that were left. All the buses had left already. Most of the teams were like, forget it. We're not running the Oakley ran the boys and the girls 4x4. They hung around and stuck it out and said, hey, we came here to compete. And Raft River did the same. So that was really cool to see. Even like Pocatello and Century, like local teams, had already packed it in and said, nah, forget this. We're going home. and
toughness.
Right.
Look who's hanging around.
That's right. So that was kind of cool to see them continue to battle and fight it out. So, all right, before we get out of here, we wanted to touch on the recent news. This is speaking of baseball season. It was like Ridgeview and Canyon Ridge pulled off a trade, right? Sean Impemeni, who was the football coach, and then he was the athletic director at Canyon Ridge. Well, he leaves to go to Ridgeview, right? He's going to become the new football coach at Ridgeview over in the Boise area. And then conversely, Ted Reynolds, who had previously been the athletic director at Twin Falls High School and had left to become the AD at Ridgeview, well, he's now coming back to Canyon Ridge. So Canyon Ridge and Ridgeview kind of just swapped ADs for the next school year.
Yeah, they did. Kind of a funny deal. It's kind of a running little tease, so you hired Impemeni just to take his job. And that the people in place, that's obviously not what went down, but Canyon Ridge is getting a good one. Ted Reynolds is one of the most accomplished ADs in the state. He's done it for 19 years, and he was the AD and VP at Bonners Ferry a long time ago. He did that for 8 years. Then he was at Middleton for 6 years, and then he came to Twin Falls High School for 3 years. But problems there with the financial, Twin ran into a financial nightmare at the district level when Ted was there. And it was so bad that they asked Ted, hey, we don't really have the budget for 2 athletic directors in the district. Do you want to be the athletic director for both Twin Falls and Canyon Ridge? And that's an impossible ask. But that's how bad financially Twin got themselves into. And Ted said, I can't do that. It wouldn't be fair. And so that's why he left. And a job at Ridgeview opened, and that's where, he took off. But the problem was his wife still lives down here. She works at the Robert Stewart Middle School in Twin Falls. They live in Kimberly. And so Ted's kind of doing this thing. And when this opened up at Canyon Ridge, man, he jumped all over it. And they, like I said, they got a really good, experienced guy with Ted Reynolds.
Yeah, he's on the IHSAA board right now, which is, that speaks to his background because those are limited slots, right? And that helps. I think that's going to help Canyon Ridge out a ton. It's interesting because he's going from Ridgeview and Canyon Ridge are kind of in similar situations right now where they're among the biggest 4A schools, but they are some of, and it's not for lack of effort, but they are some of the least competitive, right? Typically Ridgeview and Canyon Ridge across the board struggle compared to some of their other counterparts. And so he basically said when he's at Ridgeview, he had appealed to stay down for 2 more years in 4A. And he said, look, I know I've got 2 years to fix this thing and turn it around, and then we're going to go up to 5A, and I have a plan, and I think we're going to be ready for that. Well, now he can come to Canyon Ridge and implement a similar plan because Canyon is, they're right there on that borderline of that 5A, 4A line, and it's kind of a similar thing where he can maybe take some of what he was planning to do at Ridgeview and apply it at Canyon Ridge. Yeah,
Canyon Ridge is not going to be 4A for much longer. The problem with them is they're at 5A numbers right now. They had to petition down to stay 4A, and it was, a couple of reasons. The competitive equity that you just talked about but what conference are they going to belong to? There's no 5As around here, so they were going to have to belong to either the SIC in Boise, or they're going to have to go east and be with Highland, and it just didn't make sense financially. And so they petitioned down, and then coupled out with the competitive equity, this cycle they're going to stay 4A. Now, what happens next time around? I don't know, because you may have Twin Falls and Jerome joining them. Who knows? We don't know, but it is coming for Canyon Ridge. Just don't know when. And if you're going to put an experienced guy in there, a guy that's won the 4A state AD of the year 4 times, I think this is the guy that you want in there.
Definitely. Do you think that'll happen? You think Twin Falls and Jerome are getting up there too? I mean, I know everywhere in Idaho, the big metro areas are getting more and more populated with this influx.
I don't know, man. It's just one of those things to where, it's like inflation. Costs of goods are rising. Enrollment is rising. Do we keep the pay scale the same and let the costs of goods and everything rise, or do we rise with it? And if you rise with it, then the numbers are going to change, And so I'm interested to see really how the IHSA is going to handle that, because, if we keep the number and the cutoff lines where they're at, everybody's going to just go through the roof. So are they going to start raising that bar a little bit to keep kind of where I don't know. We'll see. That's going to be interesting.
That'll be a good off-season podcast for us, Scott, because I've kind of said that I think the numbers need to be tweaked and need to be adjusted a little bit in terms of what constitutes a 5A school versus a 4A school, because you're getting big ends, and I mean 1A is getting humongous, and 5A, 4A is getting large, and that 3A, 2A middle class is getting smaller and smaller. So
yeah, well, and that's one of the things that they try to do when they balance those numbers too, is to keep those classifications somewhat equal, to where there's not 50 schools in 5A and 15 in 4A. I mean, they got to balance it out somehow. So the lines have got to get drawn somewhere, but it definitely is a topic of discussion. And I will say one more thing about Ted. I'll give him massive props, because when I first got hired as the AD in Jerome, Ted, when he was working at Middleton, my sister was the AD at Eagle. And so they knew each other. And I used that connection to reach out to Ted and say, Ted, hey, man, you got any knowledge you can bestow upon me? And so that summer before I took the job, I mean, a dozen times or so, I was in his office, 8 o'clock in the morning, notebook open, and he is just vomiting AD information on me as much as he could. And, man, I learned a lot from him. I didn't understand what any of it meant, so I had to take everything he said and sort it out, put it in boxes, and eventually when the boxes made sense, I could open it up and go, oh, I know exactly what he was talking about. But I really owe him a lot for really helping me kind of get my feet wet in this job with all of his experience. So I wish him the best at Canyon Ridge. I mean, he's got some work to do there. But like I said, he's a good man for the job.
Yeah, it'll be nice for him to come back home, so to speak, in that Great Basin Conference. That's a good group of ADs there across the board in the Great Basin Conference. So maybe Ridgeview and Canyon Ridge can start playing each other in football every year. We can have the Reynolds Impo Bowl.
Yeah, no kidding, right? That's funny because before Ted got there, Ridgeview is still new, but Ted really worked to establish a connection down here, with the school. So we've got him on our basketball schedule now, and we're participating in baseball and softball with him. So and a lot of that's Ted's doing, just reaching out down here to the people that he knew and said, hey, let me get out of the Boise Valley and let you guys play somebody out of the Magic Valley. And we're like, absolutely. And Ridgeview's been great for that for us.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Well, we went a little longer today, but that's all right, because we missed a week, and we'll be back again next week to talk about more exciting. I already have a topic lined up. It was too late to get it in for the deadline for this week's show, but we've already got something to talk about next week. It'll be pretty exciting. So,
good teaser, Brandon.
Yeah, you'll have to stay tuned to see which athlete and which team we're going to talk about next week. I'll just say it's one of the more impressive performances we've seen this season in their respective sports. So be sure to stay tuned for that next week. Until then, for Jimmy Dugan, Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Baney, and we will see you next time on the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.